expecting a third temple? Why? There are some very down-to-earth reasons why Christians and Talmudists have been taught to look forward to a third temple. When I speak of those reasons being very down-to-earth, it would be better to say very earthy reasons. And carnal would even be a better word. Actually, this temple business is a math problem. Before I deal with the math, let me mention how numbers of Christians say they believe the Bible, yet refuse to accept any first-century history that backs up what Christ said. It is almost as if when you mention history to them, you are denying what the Bible says is still yet to happen. When I have mentioned or quoted passages of Scripture, I've had them tell me that is your interpretation. Then this has been said. We just have to agree to disagree. Well, not one of the Christians of the New Testament ever agreed to disagree, for the truth sets people free. The Bible clearly describes the building and rebuilding of two temples and even refers to an older third sanctuary. Christians are addicted to there only being two, for that means the world has to keep getting worse and worse, and every nation of the world must be involved in a horrible, bloody war, so Jesus will come back. However, in this presentation, I am going to tell you why they are enjoying that thought. Now, before I deal with the math, see if you can think of some very earthy or carnal reasons why that not only Christians, but Talmudists and financial investors are happy there has only been two temples. They are looking forward to a third one. I'm going to start with a reference to that older one that is not referred to as being the first, and it was called a tabernacle. This might be why it is not called the first one. And now, because ye have done all these works, saith the Lord, and I spake unto you rising up early, and speaking, but ye heard not, and I called you, but ye answered not, therefore will I do unto this house, which is called by my name, wherein ye trust, and unto the place which I gave to you and your fathers, as I have done to Shiloh. And I will cast you out of my sight, as I have cast out all your brethren, even the whole seed of Ephraim. That's Jeremiah 7:13-15. Well, this ended up a sad story that is seldom mentioned. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle of the congregation there, and the land was subdued before them. That's Joshua 18:1. Let me read that last little part there again, because that's not accepted really by most of the Christians of the world. It says, and the land was subdued before them. Other places said they received all the promises that God had made to their people. Well, that tabernacle was just as holy as Solomon's temple, and its design was given to Israel in great detail from Exodus 26:7 to 40:35. And it and Shiloh and the seed of Ephraim ceased to exist, and that memory was used as an example and a warning, and God made it very clear that it would also happen to not just their temple and one tribe, but their whole nation if they kept rebelling. But they did. They just kept on rebelling. Now to the history that lays down the need to add correctly, such as 2 plus 1 equals 3. The first temple was destroyed in 586 BCE when the Jews of the kingdom of Judah went into exile known as the Babylonian captivity. The second temple period is said to have existed between 516 BC and all the way up to 70 AD. And I put right there, it is said to have existed between those dates. Now, Jewish eschatology teaches their people that the second temple is yet to be replaced in the future by a third temple, and the fact that happened in the past escapes them. That story has since been accepted by Christianity and is due to their unbelief, and has so blinded both groups to where neither the Jews nor the Christians can add or count. They don't get it. 2 plus 1 equals 3. That myth-based story of a future destruction of the second temple was probably created as a way to remove the destruction of Herod's temple from being the fulfillment of Christ's message. That myth has effectively hidden the fact that Herod's was a third temple, and its destruction was exactly what Christ had foretold. However, that myth has been very effective. The temple that was present during Christ's ministry and was destroyed along with Jerusalem in 70 AD is consistently referred to erroneously as being the second temple. There are two very selfish but rewarding reasons for the acceptance of that myth. The first reason has to do with the support of the takeover of Palestine by Zionistic Talmudists. That situation has also been sold to millions of Christians and has been providing financial assistance for that effort, beginning even before World War I. Herzl was influenced by several prominent Christians into using that myth as a way to justify their going to Palestine, along with the need to also promote anti-Semitism as a motivation to the Jews all over the world to go there to escape persecution. At first, not many took the bait other than some in Germany. Now, that third temple myth supports the control Israel's leaders. Supports the control of Israel's leaders. The second reason is because it supports Christians' unbelief. They rely on literalizing symbolism and put that in contention with Christ's own words. By doing that, they can excuse the moral degeneration of their churches, their families, and their nation. For to them, all of that is just the signs of the times and is proof to them that Christ is about to return. The effect of that is devastating to the cause of Christ, for it not only undermines the moral influence of Christianity, it also undermines Christ and turns him, too, into nothing more than a myth. But that takes the heat off, for with that in mind, it becomes God's will, and to stand against it is to stand against him. That's the way they look at it. The third reason is motivated by greed. I am speaking of Christian prophetical ministries. Take a look at the bookshelves in a Christian bookstore that are filled with all kinds of material about the end times or the end of the world. Those books and ministries are good financial investments. Numbers of prophetical ministers are very wealthy, and publishers make a lot of money on those books. Churches that cater that also keep their congregation entertained and do not tell them the truth, for it would bring down wrath on them from many quarters if they did. Trinity Broadcasting and its programming promote Israel and end-time ministries, and a great part their successes depend on that myth. I'm not going to insert scriptures that go into the actual end-time message in the New Testament, but it was about things that were at hand 2,000 years ago, and the world is never to be destroyed. There was an end of an age back then. Now here is some actual history about the end of the second temple and the building of the third one, that building program. And that building program began even before Christ began his ministry. I can only introduce that, for there is a lot of history involved that proves Jesus knew what he was talking about, especially in Matthew chapters 23 and 24. And they need to be taken together in context. But the 23rd chapter is seldom mentioned. At least one Dead Sea Scroll contains references to a soon coming destruction of Israel that agrees with what Christ foretold. Some of that like to not get published for years and years, and three major religions didn't like the idea that back then there was people thinking Israel was facing destruction right along with Christ. These quotes are either based on Josephus' words or taken from his histories. In 20 to 19 BC, in the 18th or the 17th year of his reign, Herod announced that he planned to renovate the temple. That's mentioned by Josephus. But it seemed like he had more plans than just renovation. Now, he first removed the old foundation of the Temple Mount, as we know from Josephus, and again, it tells where that's found, and from excavations to the west and south of the temple walls. Then, beginning in 1920 BC, Herod the Great began to enlarge the existing Temple Mount to be able to accommodate larger crowds of Jewish festival pilgrims. Now, the whole depth of the foundations was not apparent, for they filled up a considerable part of the ravines, wishing to level the narrow alleys of the town. And that's in Josephus' history called the War, the Jewish War, so forth. The actual Temple Mount is where the Roman garrison was located, and Apostle Paul was rescued by them after they came down and carried him back up the stairs. The Jewish people down there, right out of the temple there, they really got after old Paul. But those Romans carried him back up the stairs. And those stairs led back up to the garrison. That's in Acts 25:30 into 40th verse. Now, Herod began his expansion of the temple by preparing 1,000 wagons and 10,000 skilled artisans and 1,000 priestly garments to be worn by priests who were taught masonry, carpentry, and related crafts. That's again from Josephus. Gives the place. You can get it. You can get that Josephus history free, and you can do a search. Now, archaeological investigation reveals the outer wall of Herod's temple itself was an irregular quadrangle. South wall equals 280, and I'm not going to all that. It says, and down there it says, these dimensions were large by ancient standards, for most temples in the ancient world were much smaller. It says Herod had the old foundations of the temple removed. That's Josephus again. They had to remove it, completely rebuild it, and do that expansion to hold the new, more grandeur temple that he was going to build. His was a lot bigger. the complete foundation of the second temple was removed. It was not just a renovation. Now, the dimensions of the second temple were eclipsed by Herod's temple, and that means the temple he built was the third one, for it was too big to fit on the old foundation. These facts are conveniently ignored and forgotten for many reasons, none of them being good. The Romans and rebels thoroughly desecrated Herod's temple several times before the Israelites began rebelling, and that was one of the main reasons they rebelled against Rome. In one case, a Roman soldier walked around on the parapets up there and revealed himself to the people, and that really got them aggravated. Josephus also described how they looked upon the temple as being representative of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, that is not accepted, so to maintain the myth, they just ignore the truth. That also goes for Israel and businesses that need that myth to continue for financial reasons. Even wars are promoted by that lie, and they too are a financial bonanza for wealthy elitists. Well, this is the end of this presentation, but Jesus has been here for nearly 2,000 years, and that is a good Christmas message if you just believe it. God bless.